Carol, are you there? Hi,
Oh,
Carol.
hi, Rabbi. Ricky will not be there.
She mentioned she's at the
Oh,
doctor's. Yeah. Hi, Shell. Welcome back.
Thank you. Thank you.
So, is it great?
Yeah, it was fantastic. It was just very hot and humid there. Uh,
Mm.
uh,
how hot was it?
It was in the 90s with about 100% humidity.
I,
Whoa.
So it was very drippy, shall we say.
Gosh,
Sounds
yeah.
like Kansas City on a cool summer day.
Yeah, but it was very moving. We went to Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and it's very moving. There was even one port we stopped at where the tour guide indicated that there might be some ancient Hebrew lettering that is similar
Interesting.
to some Japanese characters.
Huh.
Hmm.
And so I looked at it, and you could see you could see a resh and a nun and it said
Hmm.
some other characters, but and there was even two Israeli women on the excursion with us, and
Uh-huh.
they looked at it and they said, yeah, it could be. You could see that, but I mean, the Japanese word was the equivalent of the English phrase "soft serve ice cream." But but you could see the ancient Hebrew lettering in it. So he was indicate. So I said, "Oh, like an 11th lost tribe of Israel," you know.
Ah,
So who knows?
yeah. I
Very
just
hot.
traveled all over.
Yeah.
Hello, everybody.
You know,
Hi,
But
Hoodie. Shalom, Rabbi Zucker.
hello, everybody.
Hi.
Okay.
okay.
Should be um let me just make sure that this is
I do it with my phone. Yeah. It's.
okay, there we go. Wanted to make sure this was normal size.
Pretty fine, Robert.
Yeah. So, we're going to take a look at a couple of verses. It's all really going to be on the same theme. And it First of all, Parashat Ki Tetzei has, I believe, the largest number of mitzvot of any
74,
parasha, like 72, 73,
74,
74,
74.
74. That's what Rambam says. And a lot of these laws reflect.
And keep in mind that any mitzvah that was already in the Torah can't get counted in Kitetza. So if, let's say, there's a duplicate, like there are in so many other places in Sefer Devarim, the mitzvah is credited to the earlier parsha, not to the later one. So given the fact that this parsha is 5 away from the end, it's nothing short of incredible. It has more than 10% of the mitzvah.
Yeah. So, yeah, a great point. And also, what is reflected in a lot of these laws is what we've seen in Deuteronomy, a certain harshness. So, for example, if a woman sees her husband is in a fight and she grabs the testicles of his opponent, her hand is cut off. We have the very beginning, the Ben Sorer Moreh, the rebellious child who is stoned to death. And there are a number of laws in here that could be seen as being rather harsh. And yet, as I've often mentioned before, Deuteronomy, for all of its harshness, and we know the political background and why sometimes you have the harem traditions, but for all of the harshness, Devarim is really a great book of compassion and social justice. I mean, after all, as we saw in Parashat Shoftim, one of the major themes, of course, is justice. Israel inherited like a millennium of a legal background, but it, further developed a legal system and saw a legal system of judges, people who can uh, punish, as being essential for any society. And we'll see a little bit more what becomes essential for Israel. But let's take a look at a couple of different verses and just some interesting commentaries. They're not all of these are the most important comments on any of these verses, but like I said, there's an overall theme. So we begin with the very beginning pasuk of the parasha. Ki tetzei lemilchama lo oivecha, when you go out to war against your enemy, untano Adonai Elohecha biyadecha, and Adonai your God gives your enemy into your hand, v'shavita shivyo, and you take captive his captive. This is the Eshet Yafat Toar, the woman of beautiful appearance. In other words, somebody takes a spoil of war, as captive, and in the ancient world, it was very common that female captives were taken either as slaves or as wives. But let's take a look how Rashi is not totally on our topic, but I think it's kind of important because it points out a little bit of a tension that may exist within the biblical text, although not completely. Who would like to read when you go out to battle?
I'll read.
Thank you, Carol.
When you go out to battle, Scripture is speaking here of a Milchemet Reshut, non-obligatory war, for in regard to a war that was waged against the inhabitants of Eretz Yisrael, Scripture could not possibly say, and you take captive his captive, since it already had been stated, only in the towns of those people. You shall not allow any soul to live.
So Rashi, so what is Rashi's problem here? As we always say, Makashela Rashi. What is his issue?
What seems to be a contradiction, seems at
Right.
first blush to be a contradiction.
Yeah. We know that when the Israelites are told to conquer Eretz Yisrael, they are to proscribe the entire population. And here it's saying when you take a captive, well, if you're taking a captive, you're obviously not destroying everyone in the town. So Rashi has to add that here we're talking about a milchemet reshut, a non-obligatory war. We've talked about this before, that there are two types of war in the Jewish tradition: milchemet mitzvah, literally a commanded war, sometimes, as we'll see in the commentary, called milchemet chovah, an obligatory war, and milchemet reshut, a non-obligatory war. The obligatory war is a war of defense. It's a war against the seven nations that we are told to destroy. It's a war against Amalek. But a milchemet reshut, a non-obligatory or a permissible war, is like when the king wants to expand his territory. Yes, Yehudi?
I just thought it's a little bit strange to go ahead and say these two statements seem to be contradictory. because if you see that it's a Muhammad Rashid, then it can't be Canaan. I mean, the Canaan is not Muhammad Rashid. So I don't understand what the Sifrei and Rashi are up to here. I really would appreciate if you could unpack this for us, Rabbi Papa.
Well, I think that in general, when you look at the texts in Deuteronomy, on one hand, you have very strong cherem traditions, and then you also have statements about when you make war against this, when you besiege a city and you offer it terms for peace, and then the few verses after that, but oh, these are cities that are distant from you, because it
Yeah, we read
recognizes.
that a few weeks ago.
Yeah. So there's, I think, a tension within the biblical text between uh, the sense that you have to wipe out everyone. I mean, certain this is Shiva Amamim, the seven peoples, Amalek, but not so much for others. But we're supposed to destroy Amalek, and yet Amalek, as we've talked about before, Amalek pops up again and again, even among Israel's enemies, but no particular uh, anger or hatred toward Amalek any more than to any other enemies. And yet we also have the stories about destroying Amalek. So I think that Rashi and Sifra, or Sifrei, I should say, are picking up on some tensions within the biblical text. And, this is so totally odd. It's got to be a Milchemet Rashut because you can take captives. And yet, you know, how can it possibly be a Milchemet Rashut if you're fighting within Eretz Yisrael against the Shiva Amamim? So I think they're just picking up on the tension that exists. And here, going on with Rashi's commentary, go ahead, Carol.
The law.
No, and you
Yeah.
take captive his
Oh,
captive.
and you take captive his captive to include Canaanite people living in it, in a city outside Canaan, that it is allowed to capture them, although they belong to the seven nations.
Yeah, so if somebody from Canaan is lucky enough to be on vacation somewhere else, but their city, wherever they're vacationing, I'm kidding here. I don't think they took vacations in the ancient world the way we do today. But you kill the Canaanites if they're in Canaan. But if they're elsewhere, you could take them as captives. You don't have to totally destroy them.
Well, T-Day clearly comes out and states that this law permitting marriage with foreign women must refer to non-Canaanite women.
Right. Yeah.
But if we're going to say that, then where are we with what Rashi just said?
Yeah. So, these are here to show that there, I think, tensions within the text and maybe moral qualms about, what we're supposed to do, what we can do. Again, within the time of the Bible, it's not, they don't necessarily have the same qualms that we might have, but, as tradition develops, but I think even within the biblical tradition, as we'll come to, we'll see what is a real overarching concern within Judaism. Carol, would you read Tigay's commentary here?
The law dealing with marriage to a woman captured in war appears here and not in chapter 20 because it focuses on marital relations, not the war in which she was captured. This law requires a soldier who wishes to marry a captive woman to show consideration for her feelings. He must allow her to adjust to all that has happened by bringing her back to his home and waiting a month before marrying her. In case he later becomes dissatisfied with her, he may not reduce her to slavery. A significant aspect of this law is its respect for the personhood of the captive woman and the moral obligation created by initiating a sexual relationship with her.
Yeah, so Tigay is pointing out that there seems to be a clear sense of compassion for this captive woman. A compassion that was not necessarily present in other ancient Near Eastern peoples, or not always present even in the Tanakh, but clearly this is seen by Tigay, and I think he's reflecting a lot of Jewish tradition, that there's a sense of compassion, even for an enemy. So, he does kind of assume that this is not a war of cherem, that we have to prescribe the inhabitants, but in any case, emphasizing the sense of compassion. Now, I should say that when Rambam gets into this in his laws of wars and kings, he's not always so compassionate. He's quite compassionate, but if the woman decides to stay with him, and if she's with him for 12 months, and she still won't give up her idolatry, he has to kill her. So, there, it's not always so warm and fuzzy, but the fact is that on its face, there's an element of compassion.
I
And
think it's a very strong element of compassion.
yeah,
I mean, push comes to shove, we all know what happens to women of the enemy in war.
right.
Okay, so here he's proceeding. The law is proceeding to say that no, that's not what's going to happen in your wars. Okay, number one, at least I realize that the rabbis permitted a first intercourse, but that's
Right.
not what the text says. The text says you have to wait 30 days to give the woman a chance to mourn her parents. We're going to assume, despite the drash on Eshe Ifatoa, that all that expression means is a beautiful woman. It does not mean a married woman.
Yeah,
Okay,
the
so she's mourning
commentaries say
her,
that even if
her,
she's
her, her
married,
yeah. But I'm saying, according to the plain Pashup shot, we're talking about a young woman who is not married, who has a father or mother. She basically is allowed to work for them for 30 days, and then only then can the soldier then have sex with her. Okay. And if he chooses not to have sex with her, he cannot enslave her. So
right.
if you think about it, just read what happens to Hector's wife in the Iliad.
Right.
Okay.
And also, the rabbi, I mean, many commentators point out that the whole idea of cutting her nails, shaving her head, all that is you make her less attractive so that, it's,
Well, it's a question of how you're going to read Vyasata Pornell. Some
yeah,
people say it means, make them less attractive. Most people would assume that means make them more attractive. I don't really think you have to basically take a position on that because I know that's a rabbinic take on this. To me,
yeah, no, I'm just mentioning that's, the rabbis add to this notion of, somehow as, as respect for the personhood of the captive woman and the moral obligations created by initiating a sexual relationship with her. I think he's
and
also
notice what it says at the end. Tachat asher inita.
right.
What have you done? You've taken her and had sex with her against her will.
Yeah,
That's basically, let's use the English word, that's rape.
right.
Okay. So, I mean, that is a very strong statement about clothes of war. That's being written more than 3,000 years ago.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, very clearly, this is, we see very often the distinction between Israelite law and ancient Near Eastern law, non-Israelite. There's an element of compassion and ethics that is much more pervasive within
You have another one
biblical
in
law.
this parsha, Rabbi Pop.
Yeah,
Lo taskir eved el Adonav.
yeah,
That's one of the clear. There's no other ancient Near Eastern code of law that has such a law.
right.
But it's still hard, even though it's showing compassion, etc. I mean, the fact that they're still going and killing this poor girl's family and people she knows and the whole population, especially if it's a milchemet reshut, if God didn't really, command us to do it, and even if God did command us to do it, it still seems very cruel, and I don't get it. And people
But you
reading,
have to put it in context.
I know,
No,
I know.
very few wars are anything but cruel.
That's
Yeah.
exactly right. Rabbi Zucker, you hit the nail right on the head. What the Torah is trying to do is reduce the amount of cruelty that was almost invariably practiced in war. You
Yeah.
know, now you're going to say, but it doesn't come up to our standards today. That's not the point. The point is we only reached our standards today because codes like the Torah decided to go against what was then accepted.
Still, I don't know. I don't know why God had to make all this
Rome
stuff
wasn't
the way
built
he
in a
did.
day.
I don't know.
And if
Well-
you think of the time period, particularly if you take a critical approach about the timing of the Devarim,
Yeah.
this is the Assyrian period, and look at
Oh my God.
the bas
Yeah.
reliefs from Lachish that are in the British Museum today from Nimrod, where the leaders of the enemy to the Assyrians, meaning the Judeans, are impaled on stakes. Not just
Yeah, and that's
killed, but impaled.
yeah,
So
and
the
often
cruelty was widespread.
and actually in they would impale, like if they're besieging a city, they would impale, the soldiers they had captured, the people they had captured, they would impale them in front of the city so that the
Yeah,
victors had to look out and see their compatriots, impaled. And by the way, in this week's parasha, we were not going to talk about it, but it talks about how you cannot, if you hang someone, and generally they're talking about impaling, not really hanging when we think of the Old West. It says you can't leave the body up there.
which
You
is
do it,
rather
you
Which is
perform
what
interesting.
the
it,
whole purpose
bring.
of impaling is. Therefore, when the Torah tells you that, it's telling you we're going to make a concession to the practice, but only basically you can't do it overnight. So the practical matter is it's very symbolic if you do that, and then take the body off and bury it that very same day.
Yeah,
The
yeah,
interesting thing
and
is that you do have in Shmuel that David does this
Yeah,
to the
yeah, yeah,
remainder
yeah.
of the
Right,
family of Shaul,
right.
yeah,
David,
and
David.
leaves them there for like a month.
No, closer to 6 months until it starts to
Yeah,
rain.
yeah, yeah, you're right.
yeah.
Longer.
You know, the reality is they're probably, making these laws because they don't like what has been happening. They don't, they're opposed to this. Listen, we have later on in the Talmud, melech lo dan velo daninoto. A king, you don't place him as you don't judge him.
Don't judge him.
You can't put because they think of a story where one of the Hasmonean kings impaled
Yeah.
crucified really a bunch of people.
But that was following Greek practice. That was
Well, yeah, absolutely. Um,
okay.
but in terms of this sense of compassion, there is a sense of understanding of the enemy, um, which is kind of astounding. I'm bringing this in only because we're coming up to Rosh Hashanah. And you have here in the Talmud, and they're arguing about the sounds of the shofar, how long they should be, and how what they should sound like, all the different sounds. And Abaye said this is referring to disagreement among the earlier sages. Abaye is an Amora from the post-Mishnaic period, the Tanaim, people of the Mishnaic period, they certainly disagree. As it is written, Yom Teruah Yeh Lachem. It was a day of sounding the shofar to you.
Did you get that, Brenda?
Yom Teruah Yeh Lachem. Umitargaminen, and we translate it into Aramaic, Yom Yabava Yehe Lachon. It will be a day of Yivava. And how do they explain this? And it is written regarding the mother of Sisera. Through the window she looked forth and wailed. The powerful, we talked about this not in the Thursday class, but in the Saturday class when we looked at the poem for Parashat Beshalach, the Shirat Devorah. And this powerful image, which is gruesome is the word. It's a little horrible. You picture Sisera, being getting his head smashed by Yael, the tent peg going through his head into the ground. And his mother is waiting for him, sitting by the window, and all of her ladies in waiting are trying to comfort her. Oh, they're probably just dividing the spoil, 2 women for each soldier, and we have this image of the mother looking out the window. And they're using this as a way of describing the sound of the truah. Through the window, she looked forth and wailed, Vati Avev, mother of Sisera. One sage holds that this means moanings. Ganoche ganach. Umar savar yalole yalil. That it means whimpers. And Rashi explains that Shivarim, who says that it's moanings, as one who moans from the heart in the way of the Sikh who drag out their moanings, and whimpers, Yalolel, Yalil, as one who cries and mourns with short sounds close to one another. So taking these sounds of mourning, using the shofar, and saying, we learned this from Sisera's mother and the pain she went through. Not the usual. I mean, it's not the first thing we would think of if you want to have compassion for someone in Tanakh. That's not the first person you necessarily think of.
Well, you could interpret this to mean something along the line of, why is the shofar more effective than, let's just say, ordinary prayer? Why are we raising the ante? In other words, we expect Hashem to hear the shofar even if he doesn't hear the prayers. Okay, we ended the whole shofar up with Shomea Kol Truat Amo Yisrael Barachamim. So this fact, the word Yabeb is a half-act. It's very difficult to decide exactly what it means. But the very fact that they've chosen her, this is such a great model, because when push comes to shove, she's expecting them to come home with a bunch of women that they're going to rape. That's what Dan Sharon pointed this out in class. Make no mistake what it means when they say, Racham Rachmatayim. That's a 4-letter word that begins with a C for a woman. Yep. She said this in class. I'm not basically adding anything to what she said. So it's not exactly, she's waiting for the triumphal procession of, in other words, he deserves what he gets.
Yeah.
Let's understand that.
Oh, yeah. No question.
So, of course, the mothers are going to see it that way, but society will see it that way.
Well, on Tisha B'Av, one of the readings from the poems on October 7th was by Rachel Poland, the mother of Hirsch. And she talks about, her pain and thinking of the pain. There's a woman on the other side who's got similar pain. And it was Nancy Shell who said to me that poem really hit her, because all the time that, Saul was, serving, she was thinking.
Mm-hmm.
Like how concerned she is, and how, the feelings of the mothers whose children were wounded and killed in action, and thinking about the other people that were being killed. Mm-hmm. And I came across this very interesting, I can't read the whole article, but I just have seen parts of it. But Rabbi Lord Emanuel Yakubovitz, he was writing during the Falklands crisis. He's English. And he said, even terrorists have mothers.
It's also the operation in Lebanon.
Yeah, well, if he said terrorists, he wasn't talking about the Falkland crisis, because who would ever say that the Argentines
right, exactly,
terrorists? But, no way,
But actually, I think they just were picking up on the fact that he was speaking during that crisis. But this is definitely Lebanon. That even terrorists have mothers, and we must not be indifferent to their anguish. And his talk was called "The Morality of Warfare."
It's fine and dandy, but without getting into too much politics, the terrorist mothers from Hamas, they're all celebrating when their kids
they're encouraging their sons to die for them.
Exactly.
We had a case of a young man from Canada. I was in Canada. I'm blanking on his name, And he and his father went off to fight for ISIS. And he was captured. I mean, I think he killed an American soldier. He was captured, brought back to Guantanamo, and there was question, whether he should be extradited to Canada because America has the death penalty, Canada doesn't, so, maybe we have to. And, the whole time his mother is complaining about the West, about Canada, the United States, she wants her child to be a
Shahid.
Shaheed. Yeah. So, but let's just take the topic morality of war and the fact that going back to the Bible and continuing through contemporary times, Am Yisrael, is concerned that it's doing the best it can. So I remember that, on Yom HaZikaron in Israel, they play on the radio memories of the soldiers who were killed. It could be from family members, it can be from friends. And I remember one man talking about his commander who said, Hulacham b'chesed. He fought with loving kindness. It's a powerful line that the people, Mazinim, the people listening, and the people, in which this soldier fought, among whom this soldier fought, something like this is important.
I think this is easier to understand in naval warfare than in land warfare. Because in naval warfare, among civilized people, and even the German army, for a couple of years of the Second World War, once you sink you have a ship, then it's your obligation to pick up anybody who fell off that ship. And normally speaking, until the war got really out of hand, that was followed.
Yes.
But in other words, it's a little, the tradition is very well established there. After what are you supposed to do if a man parachutes out of a plane? You can shoot him down, but it's very interesting. It's very rare that when they shoot them down from the air. If they get shooted down, they get shot down from the ground, and which is legitimate because they are armed, even in the parachute. But what I'm saying is, again, it's I have a term for people who get too into the ethical and moral side of something like war, which is not my term. It's what they call in Israel yefei nefesh. People who don't want to basically see the reality, like Rabbi Zucker just pointed out. This is not a game. Okay, Israel's most important goal right now is not chesed. Our most important goal is to defeat Hamas utterly and get them out of there. Okay, because if we don't, we're just going to have another 1,200 people dead, 10 years from now or 5 years from now. So that's our basic goal. We have to fight this war the way the United States of America and Great Britain fought the Second World War. When you have enemies who are basically out to kill and destroy you,
exactly.
you have to do your best to do, by the laws of war, but you also have to get victory. There's no ifs, ands, and buts about that.
Right.
Klausnitz, you wage wars to win them, not to come to a negotiation.
Right.
And certainly not to boast after the war how ethical you were.
Although, that's
you try to be ethical.
To be honest,
you have to win.
You were so
to be honest, though,
you dropped the atom bomb on us. How ethical was that?
Yeah, well, that raises a very important issue. I said, first of all, none of us have served in the military, so it's very easy for us. And we sit comfortably here in the United States, so it's very easy for us to talk.
And especially
people who are through the military, have some different perspectives. And even when you talk about the atom bomb,
or Dresden,
there are Dresden is much better. That was horrible, but we have to do it. But even with the atom bomb, there are questions that can and should be raised. Did we choose the right target? Could we have demonstrated the bomb and created enough damage and convinced the Japanese without hitting such a populated target? And even if we had to strike Hiroshima, Did we need to also bomb Nagasaki? And that there's still ethical questions,
That
and then they came up as well, and the tension the two of you were bringing up, they came out as well. If you remember, a number of years ago, they tried to have an exhibit on the Enola Gay, the plane that dropped the first atom
Yeah, at the
bomb.
Smithsonian, right? It
Yeah,
all blew up in their faces.
yeah, because and unfortunately, I think it was a conflict between understanding that historical event in its historical context. The people who made the decisions, I don't think all of them were so ethical, but the fact is they were living in the context of a world war and they had to make difficult decisions. And people putting together an exhibit or visiting an exhibit have the luxury of looking at it from a different perspective. We were looking at it after 50 years of a Cold War, and it's, and, I actually just another quick story. I remember one of my teachers in Israel, being on patrol, and they had to and I guess there was somebody who was shooting as a sniper, somebody shooting onto the roads, and they had to get information. So they picked up a number of the people, that number of residents of the West Bank, or maybe it was Gaza, I don't know. And that this guy was not being cooperative. So the Israeli commander just smacks him, sends him flying up against the wall. It's like, we need this information now. And it was true. They've got to stop a sniper. By the same token, the same commander, when he was looking at where this guy was, the guy had gotten all the information, smacked up and got all the information from, he was sitting in the trunk and he saw that his hands were tied particularly tightly. And they use those plastic ties, which are pretty darn uncomfortable. And he saw that they were tied like really tightly. The guy's hands were turning blue. He immediately cut them and started rubbing the guy's hands. And, one context, he had to act. In the other context, he also had to act. It's like this, there are ways we treat prisoners. So it's difficult. But let's go on to another because, it's to be honest, I remember speaking in a Christian church, and somehow we were talking about the Shoah, and of course, one of the people in the audience asks a typical Christian question, why can't you just forgive the Germans? And my comment was, well, unfortunately, all the people who could are dead. It's not my place to forgive them.
That was very good, Reverend Pop.
Yeah. So let's go on to another very famous law
I
about
think I would have
that.
flipped it and said, why couldn't the church forgive the Sanhedrin for condemning Jesus?
Well,
That's
I
good
live
too. Both are good.
I live after Vatican II. So they've supposedly forgiven us, although
The church
around the
has
world to do.
the church, the
Yeah.
Protestants. I wonder.
Oh yeah, well, and some places, Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania, God love it. It's my hometown. They're a little slow in the uptake. In fact, one of our close friends who came from Chicago, Catholic, very devout Catholic, she said, the church here is so backward. And I was driving to rehearsal for the Northeastern Pennsylvania Youth Philharmonic with some of my friends who are all from Wilkes-Barre and rehearsals in Scranton. These are good Catholic girls who went to the Catholic high school. But we had known each other. I was driving, so I kind of been at least 11th grade. So, or 12th grade. So we had known each other like 4 years. Very, very friendly. Never in any way, shape, or form did they evince any anti-Semitism, nor did their parents. I think it was anti-Semitism was exceedingly far from their minds. But somehow we were talking, and they said, "Oh yes, of course the Jews killed Jesus."
Yeah, Rabbi Zucker is right. They have not in practice eradicated this from
Right.
ordinary Catholic Church parish teaching. You know, it may have been eradicated in terms of high doctrine, but in Brooklyn, I can tell you how many times my nurse once came to me and said, "You know what the priest said in church today? Anybody who doesn't believe in Jesus is going to HELL." You know,
Yeah.
and I think I said to her, I think the priest probably means any Catholic who doesn't believe in Jesus is going there. But, you know, perhaps I got the feeling afterwards that that's not what he meant. He meant anybody, period.
Yeah. Allison's roommate in college, told her she was going to hell. Very, very devout. They happen to be very nice people, but even so. So let's go on.
I remember that from my childhood. A Missouri Synod Lutheran minister telling my father, "It's a shame you're such a nice guy and you're going to go to hell."
Yeah. Well, and my answer to that is always, don't worry, I'll save you a seat. Carol, would you continue reading this other very famous first of all, here the other very famous bit of compassion, when you encounter the nest of a bird before you in the way, in any tree or on the ground, whether fledglings or eggs, with the mother crouching upon the fledglings or upon the eggs, etc., etc. You are not to take away the mother along with the children. Send free the mother, but the children you may take for yourself. And we even have the reward, that it may go well with you and you may prolong your days. So very, very important. Now let's take a look at what Ramban has to say. Again, these are not necessarily the most important commentaries on these verses, but they do reflect a certain perspective. So here, Carol, when you encounter
the nest of a bird before you, this also is an explanatory commandment of the prohibition, it and its young you are not to slay on one day, because the reason for both commandments is that we should not have a cruel heart and be lacking compassion.
That other mitzvah, by the way, is we're not to slaughter an animal and its young on the same day, even for a sacrifice. Go ahead.
Or it may be food within that species. Oh, I'm sorry. Scripture does not permit us to destroy a species altogether, although it permits slaughter for food within that species. Now, he who kills the mother and the children in one day, or takes them when they are free to fly, it is regarded as though to be cut off, that we cut off that species.
So here, kind of an interesting addition that he adds. First of all, clearly bringing out the element of not being cruel, but also, a concern that a little bit of an ecological concern here, and that appears elsewhere in the tradition. So kind of interesting. We're going to skip the Talmudic section. Go on. Now he,
Rabbi Moshe ben Maimon, wrote in the Moreh Nevuchim that the reason for the commandment to release the mother bird when taking its nest and the prohibition against killing the mother with its young on one day is in order to admonish us against killing the young within the mother's sight, for animals feel great distress under such circumstances. There is no difference between the distress of man and the distress of animals for the young, since the love of the mother and her tenderness to the children of her womb are not the result of reasoning or the faculty of intelligent speech, but are produced by the faculty of mental images which exist among animals, even as it is present in man. But if so, the main prohibition in killing the mother and its young applies only when killing first the young and then the dam, but not vice versa, whereas the Torah forbids it to be done either way. But it is all an extraordinary precaution, and it is more correct to explain them as prohibitions to prevent us from acting cruelly.
Yeah, so there, is a real concern that people not behave with cruelty, and Rashbam here connects it with other mitzvot, as some of you did earlier on. Somebody else want to go on?
Sure, I'll finish.
Okay, thanks.
You are not to take away the mother. According to deportment,
Yeah, derech eretz.
Right.
We often translate it as manners. Actually, it could really mean
The way.
um, uh, work.
Okay.
Tov derech eretz. Talmud Torah derech eretz. But deportment, the way one's supposed to behave, kind of
Right.
conventional behavior or
Okay.
manners or whatever.
Sure.
Deportment, a good old word.
According to deportment and in response to sectarians, I have already explained in connection with the prohibition to boil the young in the milk of its mother. Similar considerations are valid in connection with the prohibition of it and its young. For this person acts with cruelty and is so anxious to satisfy his hunger that he goes to slaughter, cook, and eat the mother together with children.
So, it's really, first of all, the cruelty for Rashbam, but also that it's this almost insatiable hunger, this ravenous that, it's a very base animal, part, not even animal quality, because you're supposed to have compassion on animals. And Chizkuni makes the same point, and he takes us in another direction. Here, Ha'emek Davar, just very quickly, Lo Tikach, etc. Ra'iti Betama Mitzvah, and I see the reason for this mitzvah, Kihu Shilum Gemul Harachamim. This is the payback, or the responding to compassion. Tahatam haya becholtah lifroach min adam, because it was in the ability of the mother to fly away from the human being. Ach, baksha lahagein ala efrochim o ala beitzim, but she really desired to guard her her
Or young.
fledglings, yeah, or the eggs. Al kain timalate. Vizehu mes ife arachamim mikol makom eno ela gzeira. He's explaining it's just God's command, but again, he's pointing out that the whole thing is about compassion. And Tigay mentions that all these things that we've been reading in the traditional Mefarshim, Tigay responds to. Go ahead.
Yeah, this law is similar to Leviticus. No animal from the herd or from the flock shall be slaughtered on the same day with its young. Both laws inculcate the parent-child relationship even among animals. This motive is suggested by the preceding law in Leviticus. When an ox or a sheep or a goat is born, it shall stay 7 days with its mother, and from the 8th day on it shall be acceptable as an offering. The prohibition of boiling a kid in its mother's milk most likely has essentially the same motive.
Well, that's very
So,
interesting, because then it's not really so much Sar Balei Chaim, but rather strengthening the parent-child relationship. That would not have occurred to me.
yeah, and I think it's fascinating that all of these things, it's compassion, it's recognizing the feelings of animals, and and I think that's also part of compassion. You recognize the feelings of the other. And that is, I think going back to the stuff about war is that, having some compassion for the other side, when you recognize they are, that they have the same relationships. And again, I think, to whom do we apply that? An enemy is still an enemy, but
And will shoot you if they have a chance.
right.
But always keep in mind, with the very person that you're now trying to treat nicely, I find that term, lacham b'chesed, yeah, it's a great term to put into a funeral oration. But to me, it's an oxymoron. As a practical matter, that's not what war is about.
Yeah.
Okay, it's simply not what we're about unless you understand chesed in a Tanakh way, which means fulfilling an obligation to someone you've already encountered. In that case, what you're doing is if somebody try to kill you, habala hargacha, hashkem hargo.
Right, yeah. If someone comes to
That
kill
would
you,
be
you wake up and kill him
chesed.
first.
No,
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's where we don't turn the other cheek.
we
That's
sure
fine
don't.
if someone just wants to slap your cheek. It doesn't work if they're trying to stab you, shoot you, or blow you up. Then so. But also the sense already of an awareness of an animal's feelings is pretty powerful. But here, one more example. This has a number of different interpretations, as we'll see in Chizkuni. Lo tacharosh b'shur uv'chamor yachdav. You can't yoke an ox and a donkey together to plow. Go ahead, Shell. You are not.
You are not to plow with an ox and a donkey, because the ox continually chews its cud and eats, but the donkey does not chew its cud. Thus, this one eats, and this one is afflicted, and this is causing pain to living creatures.
Probably not
Well, afflict is
something
not
most of
the word.
us.
It means
Pardon me?
one can eat and the other one can't. Otherwise, what's going on here?
Yeah, I mean, it's again, this is not something that we would have thought of.
Yeah.
No.
And I don't know how knowledgeable Chizkuni is on animal life. But, there's a sense that, oh, if this person chews its cud, he's always got something to eat, whereas the donkey is there like, oh my God, I have to watch this guy eat, and I don't have anything.
Another interpretation, because the ox is king among the animals, and its image in on the
Is on,
is
sorry.
on the throne of glory, and the donkey is the despised animal. It is not a proper pairing.
Again, probably not something we would think of. Again, the throne of glory, when you think of the throne that is described in Yechezkel, one of them is an ox.
That's right.
And even, very likely the kruvim that were above that were on the kaporet and the cover on the aron were likely, they had probably had faces of human beings, but the bodies of a bull.
But I thought you put this pasuk in because you want to put it together with the cruelty being with the kansi part. No.
Yeah, well, yeah, but now we get finally to the answer that most of us would think of, or at least certainly the one that I learned. The Baracher, another interpretation.
Another interpretation, the compassion of the Blessed Holy One is on all creations, and the strength of the donkey is not like the strength of the ox.
Yeah, so it's like
That's what I
someone's going
always
to be
thought
working
too.
harder than necessary or harder than they need to.
Rabbi Zuckel, you taught anything different?
I was taught this last one.
Yeah, that's
I just want to because Cooney's take on this it strikes me as being off the wall. Like you say, we
I
have
would
to
agree.
find out how much he knew about agriculture. I sent you a title of a book very recently written about him and his papers. You emailed me saying, you were like Magnus Press Publishers.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So just a little bit so we know, this is just from Motzar Dinim U'Minhagim, Encyclopedia of Laws and Customs, a very, very convenient resource to talk about Jewish law. But, we talk about the mitzvah of Tsa'ar Ba'alei Chayim. So to know what it is, go ahead, Shell, a warning.
A warning not to act with cruelty to domesticated or wild animals, to fowl, or to other living creatures, not to cause them unnecessary pain, and to minimize their pain if it is necessary to kill them. And it is said, when you see the donkey of one who hates you crouching under its burden, restrain from abandoning it to him. Unbind, yes, unbind it together with him. Our sages explained, your enemy, even a wicked person or not a non-Jew, because of Tsar Ba'alei
Chayim.
HaChaim.
Yeah, so that, dafka, because the Torah uses an unusual example. If you see the animal of your enemy, Like, your friend, that's like a no-brainer, but even your enemy, and they said, because, it's about the animal. It's not about
Right.
this guy.
Right.
Interesting. So, and here an interesting comment from Sefer that should be Chinuch.
It is from the roots of this commandment that God wanted his people Israel, that he chose to be a holy nation full of and crowned with good and lofty traits, as blessing rests upon them from this. And kindness and mercy are from the most praiseworthy traits in the world. And therefore, he warned us to have mercy on the one under our hand and to do kindness towards him, as is written in this section, and as we know also from the tradition.
Yeah, so it's talking about, they're seeing laws of the Evet Ivri, the Hebrew slave, and how he's to be treated, and etc. And all of this, just we're supposed to have certain basic qualities. Go ahead.
And one who transgresses it and does not do to the slave that which is written about him negates a positive commandment and also teaches his soul to be cruel. And it is almost as if he testifies about himself that he is not from the children of Israel, since they are merciful ones, who are the children of merciful ones.
Yeah, so it's like almost to be part of Bnei Yisrael, you have to have this characteristic of Rachamim. That's what it means to be a Jew. We're Rachamim, Bnei Rachamim. We are the merciful ones, descendants. I wrote children here, the literal translation of merciful ones, like our ancestors, like Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And we see that in a piece of Gemara here.
David said, there are three distinguishing marks of this nation, the Jewish people. They are merciful, they are shamefaced, and they perform acts of kindness.
Shamefaced
Merciful,
means that they have a sense of embarrassment. They understand when they do something wrong.
they let's see, merciful
Merciful, as it is written.
merciful as it is written, and he will give you mercy and have mercy upon you and multiply you.
This is right after Daka. What? That is awfully strange.
Yeah,
Verse to choose when there's so many others that would be much more better proof text for this particular thesis.
Shamefaced as it is written, and that his fear shall be upon your faces. They performed acts of kindness as it is written, for I have known him to the end, that he may command his children and his household after him,
That's not wrong of you.
that they may keep the way of the Lord, to practice righteousness and justice.
yeah. This is
Whoever has these three distinguishing marks is fit to cleave to this nation.
fascinating. And I think goes together with so many mitzvot in the Torah. It's not exactly a shock. Um, I think it stands out a little bit in our parasha because there's so many examples, and our tradition learns from so many examples and uses what's in our parasha to connect it to other mitzvot in the Torah. But even in a parasha that has some, really harsh stuff in it, nonetheless, emphasizing this sense of mercy and compassion. And even you have the Gemara making a statement that, really to be part of Bnei Yisrael, Am Yisrael, really you got to be compassionate. And it's a powerful message, especially today. I'm sorry to say that I believe that we see a great deal of cruelty in so many ways. Um, and it's sad when certainly we as Jews have to recognize that that's not how we should be.
Right.
And again, I'm not talking about, even though we did see the example of war, and that's a much more of an extreme circumstance. Sadly, not for our people in Israel. It's a day-to-day occurrence. But but nonetheless, I think it's still, we know we have to have, it doesn't matter whether it's the United States or Israel or any country, we know each country knows it has to defend itself. It has to take strong action against those who are evil. And I'm blanking on the line and where it's from at the moment, but we have within our tradition the statement that, you can't, we're supposed to be merciful to people who deserve it, but if we're merciful to the people who don't deserve it, if we're merciful to the evil and to the those who are ruthless and cruel, we'll end up being, not merciful to those who deserve it. Something along those lines. I'm
Yeah.
suddenly
It
blanking.
comes from the story about Shaul. When Shaul was told to go wipe out Amalek, he responded and said, "What do you mean? Why should I wipe them out? What they did happened hundreds of years ago. And if I have to wipe out the men, why the women? Why the children?" Now, obviously, this isn't a tape recording of what Shaul said. This is the Midrash Shmuel,
Right.
what Shaul might have said. And Hashem then says to Shaul, "Oh boy, you're getting pretty moral. Wait till the time comes and we'll see if you stick by what you just said." And then Shaul does exactly the same thing to the priests of Nov. Okay?
Right.
Exterminates them because he thinks
Because they helped David.
And so the Midrash gets up and says, don't, and I believe they have this on Pasuk in Kohelet Rabbah about Al Tehi Tzadik Harbe. I think an Al Tehi Tzadik Harbe, Kohelet Rabbah has a similar, may not be, they could, in graduate school, you know how they put these sheets up where you have different versions of the same.
Right.
Yeah, okay. That's
But
what you're doing here, basically, Robert Papa. It's very nice.
yeah. But I think it's just important to understand, even in a place that it may not hit us the same way, because there's so much in this parasha. The sense of compassion is so crucial to being a Jew. And yet we're Jews, there's always one hand and the other hand. And there was
It's not just
after
that. We're
October
known for
7th,
it.
there was no question of what we had to do. So Toda Rabbah
Thank
to
you.
everyone.
Yishra Kol Chacha, Rabbi Papa.
Dimash.
To you, Shabbat Shalom to everyone.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shalom. Take care.
Bye.
Well,